We'll get started with some demos.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Anders Henriksson, and I work as a product manager in the automation engine team. So similar to Joe, I've been with ServiceNow for around 10 years, working with various integrations. So today I want to share some quite hands-on scenarios to set up the integration of a local Kafka environment to ServiceNow, basically. So I was going to start with a friendly warning to everyone out there. You're going to see me using the command line, and we're going to build flows live in this demo. So for anyone who's done that, you know how hard it can be when you're doing it for many other people, right? So as part of this presentation, there will be command line, and I'm sure there'll be typos, but that's why we do this, right? So okay, so what I'm going to show you today, and what we're going to go through it here, is we're going to look at Stream Connect for Apache Kafka and how we connect to another Kafka environment. So I call that the local Kafka environment. So we're going to create certificates because we need certificates to authenticate into the ServiceNow environment. So we're going to look at how do we create that kind of certificate that we can use. And then we're going to test the connectivity, of course, because that's usually one of the first things you do. And then we will look at setting up something called message replication, which we will come back to and talk about in more detail. And then we're going to build some flows to send messages and receive messages into ServiceNow. So before I jump into command line, etc., I was going to mention a little bit about this demo environment. So as you see me jumping around to different screens, of course, we're going to look at the ServiceNow instance. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. And within the ServiceNow instance, as Joe mentioned as well, is we have some topics. So the topics that we create in this from the ServiceNow side. We then leverage the mid server. So we are going to use the message replication that Joe mentioned earlier as well. To communicate or connect to a local Kafka where we also have some topics. So what you're going to see later is that how we can use message replication to link a topic in ServiceNow to a local topic. So that's a little bit about the environment. So when you see me jumping around, you will see me being on a virtual machine in AWS, for example, which is this local Kafka environment is running. I'm going to jump back to the instance, etc. Right? So bear with me, and hopefully I can explain it clearly as well to you here, right? So, okay, right. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be fun. So if I'll jump over to the ServiceNow instance, so I'm logged in to this ServiceNow instance. This is a Washington release of ServiceNow, and this is where we're going to configure the ServiceNow Stream Connect here as well. So the first thing, I was going to show you a little bit. If you haven't, I'm sure you're familiar with ServiceNow, but if you haven't sort of seen Stream Connect before, it comes up here in the menu on the Stream Connect, on the Integration Hub Stream Connect, and then you have a number of modules in here. The other part that I should mention while we talk about Stream Connect is something called Hermes. So the Hermes messaging service is basically the Kafka cluster that we're working with from the ServiceNow side, right? So this is where we create topics and namespaces and things like this, right? So we come back to the topics a little bit later, but I just wanted to mention the menus that I'm going to jump around so you know where I'm navigating to. Okay, but the first thing I said we were going to do, here we go. See, spelling mistake already. So I was going to create a certificate. So the reason I'm starting here is that the certificate is the basic thing of connecting to ServiceNow, right? From a Kafka environment outside of ServiceNow, then, right? So when we connect to ServiceNow via Kafka here, it's standard Kafka protocols. I should say that as well, right? So the way you use a Kafka connector or a replicator into ServiceNow is sort of the same way as you would connect to any other Kafka environment. There might be a few little things there, but we will cover them as well, right, when we come to sort of topic names, etc. Right. So, but back to the certificate. So if you have been using Stream Connect for Apache Kafka before Washington, I should say, you might know from the documentation there are a number of steps to go through to generate a certificate. There might be 20 steps or something like that in the documentation. We simplify that greatly by having this certificate generator. So I just going to use this now to create the certificates I need. And then we're going to use those certificates to do the connectivity test as well. Okay, so as you probably saw then, I jumped into the instance PKI certificate generator, which gives you this screen. So this is where I can create certificates and manage certificates then, right? So I'm going to create a new one. So I could just create one. I need to provide a password. So I'm just going to put in string here. I'm going to show you what a string is because in case I forget it, right? So Stream Connect 2024 is my password. It's obviously secret. Nobody else apart from me knows this, right? So I could create a certificate like this, right? It will give me access to read write to the topics I'm going to use it for, right? But I want to maybe be a bit more specific about this certificate because I'm going to use it for my specific scenario of connecting to local Kafka. So I'm going to click on this link called Configure ACL. And in here, I'm not going to go through all the details in here because it's probably going to take a bit too long. But what I can do is that I can provide specific topics where I want this certificate to be valid. So it gives me an option to, as soon as I click on define topics, to sort of select what topics I want to use here, right? So I can say this webinar test, I can make it read write, for example. If I have another one, I can. So I have two topics here basically. So I have one called from ServiceNow. Let's tidy up a bit. So from ServiceNow means that this data going out of ServiceNow. So I don't want to be able to write to that. I only want to be able to read from that then, right? And then the last one I was going to add was the other one, which was to ServiceNow. I can find it. It's hard to type. There we go. So to ServiceNow. So that means I'm going to bring data into this topic. So that's why I want to make it read write. So you can see how you can configure this. There are some other options here. Custom allows you to use wildcards and things like that if you have a lot of topics for maybe not as clear definitions as I have with from and to, for example, like that. But hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully that, for those of you who've used the command line, hopefully that saves a lot of time in creating certificates. So all I do now is saving that. So I have my ACL, I have my password, I click generate, and on the screen, it will, behind the scene, process these and create the certificates I need. So one that's being built in the background. There we go. Yeah, put in your questions you have in the Q&A, of course, and we have a whole panel of experts who can help you with the questions in there. So it's probably ongoing, although I can't see it right now. Okay, so it asked me to, or it's given the option to download the key store and the trust store. So I'm just going to click on these links. It's going to prompt me where I want to save them, and I am saving them on my local laptop here. I'm going to overwrite the ones I already had. Save that as well, replace. So I just save them to my laptop, and I'm going to use my laptop to test the connectivity now, right? So to do that, I'm going to jump onto my laptop here on the command line. So I have installed the Kafka binaries. They are available on my laptop here. You can install the Apache Kafka binaries, or you can download the Confluent binaries, for example. They should all work perfectly well with anything we're doing here today. So just to help me a little bit and for you to not see me produce as many typos as I would do if I had to write everything out every time. I created a little script. It saves a lot of typing for me, right? But I just can explain quickly what it does. So it's using something called the Kafka console producer. So the producer is what would generate a message into a Kafka topic, right? This command requires me to give a few parameters. One is the bootstrap server, which is how to connect to these Kafka ports, right? So you can see we have the URL or the sort of host name and port, right? So you can see I got 4 of them. It also asks me to provide a topic. So I've done the topic, the webinar to ServiceNow. So I'm pushing messages to ServiceNow in that topic. And then I have a config file here, which we're going to have a look at, right? So in the config file, and if you never used Kafka before, this is, I'm just going to use this command later. That's all I'm going to talk about really on the Kafka binary side here, right? But it's just to show the connectivity, I guess. I'm trying to go through this, right? So in this properties file, I defined my SSL configuration. So I put in the type of my key store. I put in my password, which is Stream Connect 2024, if I type that correctly. Whoops. And then it's basically the path to that file I just downloaded, which was the key store and the trust store. So now, with a bit of luck, I can run this command, Kafka producer.sh. So this will sort of prove to us that we're using a certificate that can connect to the topic, in this case, to put some messages in. So if I put in hello, stream connect 12. So you see, it's just prompting me for messages. We don't see any output or anything like here, right here. But if I stop that there, jump over to the instance, I prepared a little consumer here that's going to help us just to see the messages. So I have a little, it's called the script consumer. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this today, but it basically takes the messages for a specific topic, which is the topic we see down here, webinar to SN, and then put some information in the log. So I jump over to the log quickly. We can see if I filter on scripts. Did I do it? Oops, maybe that. Okay, you can see hello world stream connect. It in the funny way of getting messages in because they arrive the same second, and you might get them in the slightly funny order in the log here. But you can see we got messages in, so we tested the connectivity. We know our certificate is good, and we know we can connect and read and write messages. The next thing I just wanted to show, so maybe you're wondering, okay, good that you've written a script that using all this information that you prepare, but where did it get the bootstrap servers that information from? And that's available on the instance as well. So if I go back to the Hermes, and there's a diagnostics page in here. And the diagnostic page will give you a little green tick to see everything looks good. And this is where we can see our bootstrap. And I should also mention that the ports for the producer bootstrap compared to the consumer bootstrap are different, right? But just bear this in mind. All this information is in here when you log in on your instance, once you have the Hermes messaging service configured, etc. So that's where I got that from. Okay. Let's see what else we can do. Okay, maybe we should test the consume as well, since I've only been talking about producing. So I had a little script for the Kafka producer here. I also have a script for Kafka consumer, if I can spell. There we go. So again, using the standard Kafka binaries, console consumer here. I'm reading from a specific topic, and the bootstrap server, as I mentioned, are slightly different. The ports are different for the consumer side of things, right? So let's just check that as well. And again, when you run these commands, they don't give you much feedback. So they are sitting there and waiting. And again, I'm going to provide a little script, and it's hopefully the only two scripts I just going to mention here in the beginning, and then we're going to create a flow later on, which might be a little bit easier to follow. So if I run a script in the background here, this script, all it's doing is finding a topic, which is the topic I want to produce messages to, so the webinar from ServiceNow. I do a little check to see if I found a topic. I could have done a spelling mistake as I do these things. I create an empty header. I create a little message payload here, which is just hello world. And then I'm using the producer API to write this. Again, this is just to test the connectivity and make sure that data can flow in between here, right? So I'm just gonna run this and quickly jump back to my consumer. And you can see we got that message almost instantly back over here on the command line as well, so the command line is running from my laptop, right? So good, we know we can get messages in and we can get messages out of the service now. So the key things here is the Hermes Diagnostic Page. You will see the status of the service, as in on the ports, etc. You get the bootstrap connectivity, and also the certificates that we've been talking about, right? So today is much easier to generate these certificates, and you can also define it. There should be read-only or read-write, of course, right? And the final thing I should mention here is that the certificates that you create are unique or specific, I should say, for the instance. So you can't take that certificate and use it on another ServiceNow instance if you moved it from test to your production environment, for example. So a few key takeaways to remember there. Okay. Let's jump back to the topics. So when you want to write or read messages or get messages in and out of ServiceNow Stream Connect, you would use a topic. Topics are used by Stream Connect. Topics can also be used by other applications like log export service and things like that in ServiceNow. So there are a little bit of information I want to share with you here as well then, right? So I'm just going to click on one of these. So one of these topics we've been using now is the webinar to ServiceNow. So for those of you who you might have used Kafka for a long time, so I'm not going to go into too much detail about the topics and partitions and things like that, but I should mention that topics is the sort of the channel or the queue, and then within that topic you can have something called partitions. So the partitions are basically like different lanes for the information to be passed through this topic, right? So, and the topics are usually used for one direction, as in you shift data from one side to the other, right? So, and that's why you can see I usually name my topics to something like to ServiceNow or from ServiceNow, just to make it easier for me when I'm reusing these topics, which direction the information is going. But going back to partitions, so you can have multiple partitions. By default, when you create a topic in ServiceNow, we will have one partition. You could see the partition is almost like lanes when you're driving on the highway or the motorway, or if you have a single road, right? So if you have one partition, you have a single lane, and people drive down that lane. But to increase the capacity of these topics, you can have multiple lanes, and that will help sort of spread the load of all the messages coming through. Now, that sounds really good, of course, right? We can have multiple partitions. And now, why shouldn't I have, as many partitions as possible? But we should also remember that the messages that we're sending through on these topics, the order could be important here, right? So Kafka will promise that within a partition, that the order will be adhere to then, right? So this, and I said I wasn't going to get too much into this, but the difference, what you use to sort of say what partition you're using is something called keys. So when you send the messages on the topic, you can provide a key, and the key is used to calculate which partition it's going to. So I've mentioned this because it's important to sort of understand that when you're sending messages and the order is important, you have to provide a key. If you don't provide a key, it will go to any of the partitions in a sort of round robin fashion, I guess, right? But if you provide a key, it will make sure that it goes to the same partition for the same key. Now, this brings us on to something, and we're going to see it a little bit later, maybe when we go into the producing messages, you can see where you set the key, I guess, right? But bad keys, I guess, right? As in keys to not use, if I should mention them first, is something that's completely unique, like a timestamp within milliseconds or something like that, right? Something that will never potentially repeat again, right? That might not be the best key, because you might as well not use a key, I guess, right? Because it will always be unique, and it's going to calculate, and it's going to send it to a topic, a partition, etc. Right? So that might not be the best one. And other scenarios to think about is like Boolean values, or like true false might not be the best option either, because it might just use two partitions if you have something like Boolean value then, right? So again, have a little think, as you embark on these sort of scenarios, it's worth spending some time thinking, what is a good key for my messages? So good keys, examples of good keys, for example, could be like incident number, or the sort of number field in ServiceNow, right? So because I want to send updates potentially on an incident, a problem, or change, or any task, I guess, right? On the same partition, so I know that the order comes through on the other side in the right order then, right? So hopefully that makes sense. I've been talking a lot, and I'm going to go back to typing and creating flows here, right? So, right, let's see. Let me go into message replication. Let's see how we're doing for time. Okay. You have to shout at me if I'm running out of time. Okay, so message replication is a feature I mentioned a little bit earlier, how we can connect a topic in ServiceNow to a topic on the local Kafka. And the reason you might want to do this is that you might want an easy way of setting up this connection between two topics, right? So there are other scenarios, as Joe mentioned on his slides earlier, is that you can have Kafka connectors, you can have replicators, you can have Java code that sort of takes these messages from one topic and send them to almost anything, I guess, right? That you could want to connect those Kafka messages to, right? So, but what we are providing now in the Washington release with Stream Connect is something called message replication. So I'm going to show you here. So it's fairly straightforward, and we're just going to set up the message replication now, and then we're going to build the flows to actually push messages through. So you bear with me as I'm configuring this then, right? So I went to message replications. It's available under the Stream Connect menu, and if I create a new one here, so let's call messages to ServiceNow. I need to provide a connection, and I'm going to show you, once I save this record, I will show you what this is. But this is basically the connectivity to the local Kafka environment. Let me save that. So just to show you the messaging service connection here, if I click on this, we're going to come back. We haven't finished setting up the message replication, but I'll show you what this is first, right? So the messaging service connection is basically a credential or connection alias that we are using to connect to the local Kafka, right? So we have an alias here. It's of connection type Kafka. So before Washington, you didn't have Kafka in here, I believe. So, but now they have a Kafka option, and that allows us to connect that Kafka. We set up the connection like we do with any other aliases. So the connection is configured here. So here's my bootstrap server, in this case, the mid server. And so we're using the mid server for these connections. I should say it's configured down at the bottom here. But you can see the bootstrap server as we use to connect to any Kafka environment is localhost 1992 here. The consumer group ID, it gets generated by default, but if you need to override it, you can change that as well. And then there is a credential behind the scenes here as well. So it's a Kafka SSL credential. So when I configure my local Kafka, I can configure that local Kafka environment to use SSL as a way to connect to it. And that's once I created those certificates, very similar to what you see me do earlier, is that now I have my trust store and key store for my local Kafka environment, and I put them in here as a credential. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me jump back to my message replication. Here we go. So I've just said it's a messages to ServiceNow, and I've set up my connection. It's ready to go on that part, but what I haven't said is what topics to connect. So I call it messages to ServiceNow, right? Okay, so it's to ServiceNow. So you have an option here, say to or from ServiceNow. You pick your ServiceNow topic. So it's the topic is to ServiceNow, and the topic on the other name on the other side I need to put in. So bear with me while I jump on the command line. I connect to my AWS environment where it is all running. And again, I have some scripts just to help me get through when I demo this, right? So it's just a way to list the topics that is available in this local Kafka environment. So I call that data to ServiceNow. And it's just a string that you put in here, basically. So now we've built the replication, and this will now, you will see the status, it will sort of start up and configure itself using the mid server as the connectivity in between these two topics here, right? We haven't sent any data, of course, up, but we have set up the link between the two topics here, from the ServiceNow topic to the local topic as well. Okay, while we're here, I just gonna set up the other, because I want to, this message replication is to ServiceNow. Let's create one from ServiceNow as well. Okay, well, seem to have one here. Let me just remove this one. Don't know where that came from. Got to tidy up, maybe. Okay, we have one to ServiceNow. It's running, it's there, good. Let's create one from ServiceNow. Same connection, it's the same environment I'm connecting to. It should be from ServiceNow, so from ServiceNow, and not that I can remember, but I could have guessed that it's data from ServiceNow. So again, we just link the two topics together here. Cool. Okay, so we can see those replications there. We can see, it says stopped. Now it says running. Okay, it's all running. Yeah, that's what I want to see. Running, good. Okay. So now let's see if we can generate some messages through this message replication, through these links of the different topics here, right? So we're going to jump into Flow Designer. It's probably the easiest way to explain what we're doing in case of sending messages. So let's go there. So we're going to start with pushing messages from ServiceNow to the local Kafka. So let's create a flow. Produce. Whoops. Okay. Don't think I have time to put in all the descriptions and details, but in your test environments, you can put in the full description of it. So, okay, so we're going to produce messages from ServiceNow, push them out to a topic. That topic is going to replicate them over to the local Kafka. So we're going to use, what table are we going to use? Incident, of course. Yeah. So created or updated on the incident. Is there a demo in ServiceNow that's not using the incident table? Let's see. Okay, so we can set conditions as you can with these triggers. I'm sure you used them before. So this is just a standard trigger on a record. I can obviously set the conditions and filters, and if I want to run it once or for every update that I have, etc. The one thing to mention maybe in here while we're on the trigger is that there are some advanced options in here. So if you are using tables that extends other tables and things don't trigger, you might have come across this before. There is an option here for run only on the current table, so only the incident table. But if you extend the incident table, you need to change it to run on current and extended table. So it's something to bear in mind. It's happened to me. Okay, so now what we want to do is take the incident record, create a payload out of it, and then ship it out to the topic. And to do that, we don't have an action today that does that, so we have to build our own action. So let's do that as well. I told you there's going to be a lot of building things from scratch here. So I'll call it stream connect producer. Maybe we should call the incident producer just in case someone comes across him later. Okay. So what we're building is a flow that triggers for every incident change, and we want to push every those changes or a payload of those changes down on this topic. So we're going to start with a payload builder. So the payload builder allows us to sort of automatically build a nicely formatted JSON payload here. I'm going to take the record as an input, so bear with me while I'm doing this. Call it record, whoops, record, let's say it's reference. Okay, it's running a bit slow, but we're getting there. Sit down. Okay, so now to this action, I will need an incident record. And then I go into the payload builder step here. And I can now put together, whoops. Let's do 4 fields, for example. We always want a number. That in there. Assign to is always important to have. Assign to, and then I'm thinking, hang on, I don't want the sysid. Okay, if you're familiar with ServiceNow, the reference field will give you the sysid. That's not what I want. So I'm going to go into the user table there and pick name instead. So you can see how I can sort of walk through here, of course, to create this. And Let's pick the state. State, and one more. Priority. Whoops. Oh, okay, I only do 4. I think you have enough of me trying to navigate through here. Priority. Okay, so we can see down here it's built us a nice sort of structure of this payload. Gonna go with that. It automatically gives us an output on the right-hand side called payload here as well. So let me just save that for and mess it up here. So I could have 2 different actions. So depending on your scenarios, what you building yourself, I guess, right? You might have one action that creates the payload, depending on what type of object or what the record it is, and another one that pushes the message. To save a little bit of time, I'm going to put the producing, the push of the message in the same action here. But hopefully you get the idea of how we do this. So we see we have a Kafka producer step. You can see it gives us an option to select a topic. So from ServiceNow, the message is now my payload from the previous action, from the build list step. There we go. Now, key, here we go. We were talking about this earlier, right? So depending on the number of partitions I have, etc., right? Maybe I want to distribute, hopefully the messages evenly across the partitions. So I'm going to be using the number. You see how you can you can be flexible and even, I guess, calculate a value for the key, etc. if you want to do that. You can also set the headers. We're not going to use them today necessarily, but you can build sort of headers here, which comes across in the payload as well, and in the message as well, which can be used then for sort of examining the message before you start parsing the payload that we are sent in here, right? So let's put task type in there. That gives us an option to see if it's an incident or something else on the other side, potentially. Okay, I think that's all we're going to do here. Let's see some action maybe. So to test this, oh, I got my consumer. It's still running here. So if I push a message to that topic, it should come up here, right? Let's do that first. Let's test this. So pick one of these incidents and do a run test. So it's good to test things before we publish them. Okay, cool. So here we see the message came through, the payload we built, and that's how it works. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to publish this action. Once it's published, we're going to add it to the flow. So back on our flow. Stream connect insert. Okay, that's the longest name I've seen for a while. Okay. And the record we want to put in here is the trigger record. Simple. Okay, very, very simple flow, but I wanted to have something we could finish in a simple demo here, right? So we can activate this. If I now go into incidents, let's get all incidents here, maybe. Okay, change. He has to change randomly something here to. So I'm updating a random set of incidents. and that will then trigger the flow, and we will get the messages across on the topic. But we still, at this stage, I'm only looking at the messages from the ServiceNow topic. Right? So let's go over to my AWS server here, which has disconnected again. That's what they do. So I have a way here to read from topic. I'll show you what, again, I just have a little script that kicks off the consumer. It will read the messages on, oh, it's the wrong one. So that's why. There we go. So I have another script here called read from topic SSL, because I'm using SSL connection these days. So the topic is called data from ServiceNow. So if you remember correctly, when I set up the message replication, was that I had a local topic called data from ServiceNow, and that's what I'm reading from here. So let's see if we can kick this off. You see, I had from beginning, so it might just, okay, it reads all the messages here, right? But let's see. Okay, we got that going. I'm just going to check my message replication here. We got from ServiceNow, it's running. We connect to data from ServiceNow there. Good. Looking good. Let's go back to incidents. And let's update some other incidents here. Service. So yeah, you can see that we're getting the incidents through here as well now. So we set up the replication to go, the incidents are updated in ServiceNow, goes on the topic in ServiceNow, replicates over to the local topic here, right? And you can see we also see them here on the my local machine where I still have the consumer running there as well. Hopefully that all makes sense in what you've seen so far. And then I quickly, let me check time again, right? So I probably have, do I have another 15 minutes maybe? If I don't have 15 minutes, then stop me. But
Yes, you have.
okay, cool. Right. The last thing I'm going to do is create a flow for consuming messages in ServiceNow. So let's do that. Again, I'm going to create it from scratch. Okay, what did I call the other one? I think I called it stream, connect, webinar for the consumer. So in this flow, so now we're going to take data into ServiceNow. So we need to use the Kafka message trigger. So that's available under the trigger section under application here and Kafka message. So with the Kafka message, we need to select the topic. So I'm going to select the to ServiceNow. Find it. Webinar is usually to ServiceNow. It has some advanced option here. We can read from, so as we are activating this flow, we can choose to read from the end of the queue, as in only take new messages that are available on the topic, or we can read from the beginning, but the first message in the queue. I shouldn't say the first message, but the first message that are available in the queue. I'm going to leave it as the end of the queue for this little demo here, but that's where it's available there. And then you also have an option here to sort of set the number of messages that you want to sort of iterate over, as in how many you want to pick up each time. The recommended option is to leave it to automatically optimize. We have a very clever way of sort of working out how long does the flow take to run, and then if we have more messages and it takes longer to run, then we're going to pick up new ones, then we will reduce the number of messages, etc., etc. Right? So I will recommend to leave it to automatically optimize there as well. So that's our trigger. So we now know we're going to get messages in here. We were going to get them in a text format. Hopefully, I'm going to assume here, right? It's a JSON formatted string. but so that's, we know about the messages basically, right? I have an example that I'm going to use in a bit here as well. So, but this, the messages we get in here are actually an array. So it's an array of messages. You can see, in this case, we can see the payload, we see the headers, we see the key in this case, right? So, but we know it's an array. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a for loop. So the flow is basically going to iterate over these messages and process them. So I'm just going to put in messages in there. That's fine. And the next thing I'm going to do is, now when I'm going to look at the payload, I need to parse it, because we always have to parse these messages to get them into the right format. So let's quickly create another action. We don't have an action for that because we never know what the format's going to look like. So let's create a new one. Let's call it stream connect webinar parser. Unless I've used that before, we'll soon find out. Okay, hopefully you're following here. So the first thing I'm going to do is the input is going to be my payload. So the payload from the message. It's just going to be string. I'm going to have it mandatory. And the next thing I'm going to do is to parse that message using the JSON parser. There we go. So now I know that I can put in the input here into my source data. And now I need my example, because now I need to build that payload. I've been given an example that looks like this. So it's a payload for some, in this case, a Windows server with some name and IP address and host name. Right? Simple example, but that's what they're giving us here. We can then generate this target. So it will generate an object for us with the same structure here as what we just put into the payload here. Right? I think that's, oh yeah, and I need to create an output as well then, right? So we now have our structure. Things will be parsed from this text into an object. I need to set my output as an object as well. I'm going to call it data object. And I know it's going to be an object. There we go. Okay, so we have an object. I can now drag my JSON parser root object there into duplicate name. I'll save it in between and see if that helps. See, made a trick. Okay, so okay, I should probably have tested it. I'm going to trust that it works. We'll soon find out. It's conscious about the time, so I'm going to go back to my flow. I'm going to put in my action that I just created. Stream connect webinar parser. Payload is my payload from the Kafka message. That's what we just put in there, right? And now, what do we want to do with this? So now we parse them. I'm just going to quickly do some logic here, right? So we have some data coming in. I'm just going to do a quick check on one of the components here. So if the type I was going to check if it's a Windows server. Then we're going to do something here, right? I just cutting the demo short a little bit because so if it's a Windows server, I want to insert, create or update record. And I'm going to insert it into the Windows server table, of course. Then that's then the server table, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fields, I think. Oh, I can only do one at a time. RAM. What else did we see in there? Serial number, name, IP address. His name. Last one. Sign to. Cool. The good thing now is that because we parse that data, we can just go and select from the parser here, RAM, serial number, name. Wish I had some auto mapping here now. The address, almost there. Listing. And I don't think we had assigned to, so I asked him to assign everything to Quentin. He's here today, right? So Quentin gets that. And then you can set uniqueness here as well. So that's going to pick, say, host name and serial number makes up the uniqueness here. So I have some data in this demo data we have, which is also a Linux service, but I'm going to skip them for now. Just focus on the Windows service just to finish off here, right? Save. We could run a little test. So just do a test. I think I said it's always good to test. So we can put in a test message here. And it's the same as I had. Whoops. Okay, so I think it's finished. That's going to quickly jump to my Windows servers. Let's see if I have. Okay, the only thing I can go to now is see this change now is that Quentin is assigned to. I don't think any service is assigned to Quentin apart from that one. So we can see that the update happened. Now, because we're talking about Kafka, let's run some data through on this. Let's make sure I have published it. And done activate. Okay, so for any data now coming in, we parse the payload, we update the Windows service in this case. So double check the message replication that I set that up correctly. So to ServiceNow, it's running. You can see it's going from data to ServiceNow to ServiceNow topic here. Let's go back. See, AWS disconnected me again. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you here, and then I'm done, is that my script I have a script here that takes a lot of data, which is a sort of a formatted data, JSON formatted data, and write it to the local topic called data to ServiceNow. So when I run this, it's going to generate the data to this local topic, and then in the message replication here that we actually on here, we should start seeing data coming in. It triggers the flow because it's reading from this ServiceNow topic, and then we will update those records. So let's see, wait for the messages to come in. And yeah, Didn't want to delete. I just wanted to refresh. Okay, all right. We always keep you waiting. Like, so we can see some messages coming in. You can see the byte count. I'm going to refresh this a little bit more just here. So this is just a one way of tracking data flowing, I guess, right? So you see the collection interval for the last 60 seconds. We picked up a number of messages and what's the byte count and things like that. So we can track data coming in that way. Let's see if we got another record coming in before I jump to the next thing I wanted to show. Maybe not. Have to wait 60 seconds, I guess. While we're waiting, I'm just going to kick off something that runs for a bit longer as well. So while I'm talking about this, I get some more data into these topics. So the data's come in. If I go back to my Windows servers, yeah, the only thing we can go on here, it's sort of updated these records now. We can see that everything is assigned to Quentin because we're going in and updated these records. And then let me just double check then to ServiceNow. We should now start seeing more messages coming in here, for example. We don't see that yet, but you can track on the message replication, you can see the bytes and the messages coming in here. Similarly, if you go to the topics, so I'm just going to click through to a topic here. We can see on the subscription page, we can also see the input rates and the consumer processing rate, right? So this is a good way of sort of keeping track of how many messages are coming into a topic compared to how many messages are we processing, as in the consumers are processing on this topic, for example. And then we get a queue depth as well, right? So we can see how many messages we haven't processed yet, I guess, right? So, and this keeps refreshing every minute or so as well. And you get the sort of statistics down here as well, very similar to what we looked at with the message replication. So hopefully that takes us to the end of the demo here. There's been a lot of jumping around between command line and flows, but hopefully it's been useful to see how you can configure this in a fairly short time frame. So, cool, I'll hand it back.
Anders, really cool and exactly on time. So with these last slides or this presentation, really cool stuff. I'm not gonna use my last slides anymore. I'm gonna thank you all for participating here, being here. If you have more questions, please reach out to your account team. Recording will be available for you soon, as well as will be posted on Now Learning. The things I had in my final slides is go to Now Learning, learn, go to Sales Success Center, use the latest information, go to the community and see what is being communicated there. Go to YouTube for all other materials that we make available. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Josephine, for organizing all of that. Thank you, Anders, for your phenomenal demo. Thank you, Joe, for your explanation. And thank you, team, for answering all the questions. With that, 2 minutes late, I'm going to end the session, and we hope to see you next time. Till then, bye-bye.